welcome into another episode of Bolt Breakdowns here on the Guilty as Charged podcast YouTube channel. Here to talk about everything Minicamp, everything Chargers this week that happened with my guy Gavino, managing editor of Chargers Wire, and kind of quasi now my new boss. So, Gavino, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm happy to be on, and I'm happy to have you on board at Chargers Wire.
Yeah, so for those that didn't see that announcement, I am writing for Chargers Wire now, so we'll be writing there all summer about training camp and minicamp and everything that we're going to get into before the actual football starts. So now is the time where we actually have to dredge the content itself and make it before we get actual news. But I wanted to start with you. What, in your opinion, from the last 2 days last week, was your biggest storyline, in your opinion, from Chargers minicamp?
I think for me, it has to definitely be first-round pick Quentin Johnston. We see all of the highlights, all of the videos, and him coming out of college, being touted as some body catcher, and I know that with that, they're showing him clips of actually catching the ball with his hands, and then most importantly, him working on his route running with wide receivers coach Chris Beatty. That's definitely important. It's a knock that I had on him coming into the draft is something that you need to work on is route running in specific. So it's good to see that he is dialing that in early on. I think the connection with him and Justin Herbert is going to be vital going forward. And obviously you see that early on in minicamp. So definitely a good sight to see.
Yeah, overall, I mean, great stuff from Quentin Johnston so far, right? Like, he has to play the actual games to shed, what people think of him in terms of pre-draft and the body catch stuff. We'll say it helps to have an upgrade at quarterback. No offense to QB3 Max Duggan, but going from Max Duggan to Justin Herbert is certainly a bit of an upgrade there, and so far he has shown out. I was interested to see, I guess, what Quentin Johnston's exact role would be, and I forget exactly who commented on it. It was I think it was Herbert who said it, but he was basically like, we view Keenan, Mike, and Quentin Johnston as like outside receivers that are just kind of gonna like play everywhere at all times. A little bit Keenan, obviously, a little more in the slot sometimes, depending on what happens. Maybe QJ gets a couple snaps there, but it was interesting to just talk about like it was a big three as opposed to Chargers receivers that have been drafted in a past, like Josh Palmer, who took time to kind of like get worked in. So it seems like Quentin Johnston's kind of getting worked in really from the jump here in terms of this Chargers equation. So that's great to see. But yeah, I mean, what were your thoughts on him, I guess, pre-draft when you were kind of like doing that?
Yeah, so he was my wide receiver one. We can go back to a couple shows before the draft where I had said that. So I had him as wide receiver one. Obviously, he had the physical traits, the athleticism that they were all there. I felt like he was hampered by the quarterback play personally, and just like Justin Herbert going to the league, I feel like when he got into the NFL that he would blow up. We see how Justin Herbert has played, so I think benefiting from a quarterback like that, that's going to go a long way to his play. But I really liked it. The speed, the yards after the catch ability was there, and then just for that size too, you don't come around that often. And going into the draft, yes, I get it. We had the Zay Flowers, the Addisons, the Jalen Hyatts. So I think while they were being projected to go to the Chargers, we kind of singled out QJ just because he had that big frame. So like some people were calling him the next Mike Williams. I beg to differ. And, with him ending up as my wide receiver one, I really liked him, but I feel like it kind of really fit that Telesco mold of like the bigger receivers. And we have the comments of the Chargers wide receiver room basically like a basketball team with their height and all that. There's no one under 5 foot, aside from Darius Davis. But one thing that was pretty interesting too, if you look, was the betting lines, and I think someone posted, it must have been Steven, but the Chargers were the favorites, and this was like weeks before was Quentin Johnston, and I found that to be interesting, and I was like, no way or whatever. And then come draft day, they drafted, right. So it's just like Vegas knows, but I guess didn't really mock him as much because while he had the speed and all that, they just saw him as most people saw him as a big body receiver. So that's why they kind of put him aside. And, thought the Chargers were going to draft him or simply just go with the tight end route. But it made sense when they drafted him. Kind of fits that Telesco profile, but they got the speed and the yards after catch guy that they were looking for.
Yeah, I had like a 2 week period where I was like, they're gonna take a tight end, they're gonna take Michael Mayer, and then I think it was Arjun who first posted like the Telesco, kind of requirements of like drafting a wide receiver chart, like all the size metrics, and you realize Quentin Johnston fit every box, and like Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison obviously like didn't in that sense. And I went, okay, but you still figure, okay, maybe they'll take a smaller guy to kind of complement those guys. And then yeah, when Arjun posted the betting lines, I was like, okay, something's up here. Vegas knows something, even though the Chargers notoriously don't leak anything. Like they know something. And then to hear his name called on draft night was kind of cool, and obviously it was a shock to a lot of people. Moving on from Quentin, I do want to talk about J.C. Jackson, who obviously had the torn patella tendon last year. Coming back, I think we didn't really know going into this minicamp like what his role was going to be. Obviously did not participate in any team drills, kind of was off to the side doing his own thing, but you see him doing running, doing sprints, which, I mean, for a guy who, back in January or February was, training himself to run on a treadmill again, right, to see that kind of live movement, him having his helmet on, just all cool stuff in terms of his recovery. I think he has a meeting next Monday with Dr. Elatrece to see if he can get cleared potentially to return for training camp, which would obviously be very cool if he could actually, do some team drills in that capacity. I still think the Chargers probably play it a little cautiously, especially given, what happened with, integrating J.C. Jackson back last year and, the ankle surgery, training camp, then kind of on and off week 1, 2, and 3 prior to him like finding his footing before that Seattle game where he unfortunately got hurt. But yeah, what were your kind of thoughts just seeing how active and how involved he was this week?
I think it's just been great from the beginning, seeing his recovery process. I mean, the injury that he had is nothing to mess around with. Like, it's going to be like a longer term injury in terms of the recovery process. And to see how well he is improving has been a good sign. Seeing him on the field, moving pretty well. Obviously, fans see that, they're very optimistic, like, oh, he'll be ready ready for training camp. Maybe not, and even from his comments, what else is he going to say? Like, I'm going to be ready to go like, in the middle of the season or whatever. Like, of course, he's going to say that he'll be ready to go for training camp. Based on how the team has been, how they treated injuries, and how they're definitely going to treat injuries with the overhaul of the training staff and everything, I think they're going to ease them back in. I think they like the corners that they have with Davis, Samuel Jr., and then with Ja. They see a bright future with him in the slot too. So it's good to see J.C. Jackson's improvement on the field with his recovery and everything like that. It's good to see him moving well. We'll obviously have a lot, when he gets word from the doctor and how long that's going to be. But I don't expect him to be out there full speed training camp. Beginning of the season, not too sure. So I can see them just really easing him back in. But once he gets back out there, it's going to be interesting to see how he performs because, it was a down year. No one was expecting that type of year from him. So someone to keep an eye on for sure, because if he can get back to that all-pro status that he once was with the Patriots, that secondary is going to be pretty dangerous, especially with the type of year that Michael Davis had last year and actually like just has been playing in general the past couple seasons.
Yeah, I mean, it's been weird to just kind of think about what this cornerback group was going into last year, right? Michael Davis was essentially an afterthought. He was CB4, right, until Denver game where they bench J.C. Jackson, and then he gets thrown in and obviously had the year he had, which was really great to see. And now you feel a lot better about the Chargers' depth, even given the J.C. Jackson injury, because it's like, okay, we can put John in the slot. He'll take some bumps and bruises there, but overall we feel really good about having Asante and Michael Davis on the outside, which is something the Chargers would kind of take any day of the week. And then you add JC back, and now it's okay, JC and Mike Davis, on the outside, maybe Asante and Joss splitting the slot, or Asante going outside sometimes. So yeah, you would feel really good about the depth there, assuming that JC is able to make it back earlier in the season. Interesting, yeah. The overhaul of the training staff, I guess that's kind of been the big storyline. Damon Mitchell was with the organization for 24 years, 6 as the head athletic trainer. Brandon, he ends up getting, I think they moved on from him in February. So now this real new regimen is kind of being installed. Obviously, the Chargers had that NFL survey poll that talked about like the relationship with the facilities and the head athletic trainers, and they kind of ranked very low in that as well over the course of the offseason. So curious to see, I guess, how Staley and Telesco's relationship with this new staff and what the responsibilities will be for Sal Perez and Marco. I can't remember his last name off the top of my head, and I just wrote about him. But
how do you pronounce it? Zucconi?
Zucconi. Yeah.
Zucconi.
Yeah. It could be Zucconi, it could be Zucconi. But yeah, I think he did win as the associate athletic trainer, assistant athletic trainer of the AFC.
Yep.
Yeah, got that. And so obviously now is promoted to director of player health and sports performance, which is cool for him. So definitely curious to see how that plays out. One thing that I also wanted to talk about, I guess yesterday was the first time we heard from Austin Ekeler after everything that had kind of happened. What were your feelings, I guess, on his press conference where there was sort of this back and forth of like, he, said there were no hard feelings, but obviously like there was, some resentment towards what the running back market is right now, right? Across the league, specifically mentioning Saquon and Tony Pollard and Josh Jacobs and those guys that got franchise tagged. Now, he's sort of in the position where, couldn't get the extension from the Chargers, didn't really get his trade market that he wanted, said kind of in a way that he was obligated to be here for another year, didn't find another way kind of around it. What do you think of that whole situation?
Yeah, so I mean, he was pretty thorough with his answers. He said that he was happy that the team and him were able to agree to something. It sounded like, he went into this thinking that he was going to get that contract that he was looking for, but obviously no teams were going to budge or anything like that. I didn't expect him to be traded. I just think with like the running back market, it's just not as coveted as people think. And Austin Ekeler being 28 years old, he's getting up there. Yes, he's more than a running back too, and he's stayed healthy as well. But just the longevity at the position, I feel like it's only a matter of time until there's more wear and tear. But regarding just his interview, the first time talking to the local media, the first time since the end of the season, it seemed like he was pretty straightforward, but you could also see some bitterness just with his comments and everything like that. He's saying that he wasn't, he's not mad. He's not mad about the situation or anything like that. But just his comment about him saying that, one more year that I'm obligated to be here, that's where people kind of took that and, ran with him like, oh, he doesn't want to be here, Melvin Gordon-esque type of situation. And I feel like he has to perform well because he's playing, like he's interviewing for another team essentially with how he plays. And even though this will be likely his last season with the Chargers, he's not going to sell himself short. He's not going to go out there and lollygag on the field. Like he has to play, like interview for these other teams, like when he becomes a free agent after this year too. But just from the comments to just like I said, the whole one more year that he's obligated to be here, that you can kind of assume that it's probably going to be his last year with the Chargers. So I feel like he was pretty straightforward, but you can see some bitterness that he didn't get what he was looking for.
Yeah. Overall, I think he was pretty straightforward, and it's like a lot of people in America with their work situations. It's like overall they like the people they work with, they like what's going on, but like there's obviously some things that you don't like, and I do think he is enthusiastic to be here, run it back, and be in a new offense, and play with Justin Herbert and all that kind of stuff. But, you do like to feel valued. And, in addition to the guys I mentioned that are on franchise tags, now you do have Dalvin Cook stuff, who, is about the same age as Austin Ekeler, right? And, just got cut from the Vikings, right? So definitely a tough time to be a running back right now, and just have to sympathize with that, unfortunately. That is the plight of the position. Yeah, and then one of the other things I wanted to mention is we kind of got this last year a little bit with Joe Lombardi and like how Minicamp went. It's like, oh, the Chargers are going to throw it deep this year, right? We did get that this year, and obviously with Kellen Moore and Herbert, we're kind of getting it again. Although this time does feel more real, right, in terms of what the offense will be. Obviously, even Herbert kind of dismissed it in his press conference in the sense that he said, like, oh, it's June, right? Who knows what this is going to be by August? Who knows what this is going to be, what our makeup is on offense by October or November, right, in terms of how many deep shots we're taking. I guess what stuck out to you about the Kellen Moore kind of offense this week and the perception of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell really with minicamp like how it's going to look. They're still in the early stages, so it's hard to see how it all unravels in this part of the year. Training camp will be a little bit more telling, but just from what the skill players have said and just the players on the team in general, they've made comments about like we're going to throw it deep and all that, and I definitely believe them. I feel like the numbers back it up too, and I'm sure you guys talked about it early on. I haven't been on to talk about like Kellen Moore, but just looking at when he was the Cowboys offensive coordinator, Dallas had the 7th highest average depth of target, which was like 8.3 air yards per attempt. And then, Herbert being one of the best quarterbacks on the move, we saw that when he was with Dallas. And I think in 2019, 2021, 2022, Dak had like the 9th most dropbacks where he was rolling right or left, scrambling right or left to throw. You get him on the move. We talk about that, every single week. Keys to victory. You get Justin Herbert on the move. That's where he's at his best. So with that, I think we're going to see a lot of that. We're going to see him being on the move, and just with the new offensive skill players too, Kellen Moore, it's all coming together where I think, yes, they're going to throw it deep, but also I think they actually have the speed to win, not just vertically, but horizontally as well, where they can actually threaten defenses as opposed to, having these slower receivers like we're used to. So they basically have all of the ingredients to have a successful offense where they're going to, quote unquote, throw it deep or just be more explosive altogether. So, it was very important. Like that was like the number one thing this offseason. And I feel like the Chargers nailed it from the offensive coordinator to the skill players too. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even remember the last time the Chargers had a Yaka guy. I like Quentin Johnston, and Darius Davis is certainly the fastest guy they've had in quite some time at the wide receiver position, really since Jalen Guyton. But Guyton obviously is kind of more of a straight line speed guy as opposed to Darius Davis, who can kind of be a little bit shiftier and move around. I think it's interesting with Herbert and I guess pushing the ball deep specifically in this period, because the thing that I thought about is in terms of trying to get those throws, like, yeah, some of it is probably, hey, they want some highlights for the Twitter page and stuff like that, and get some Pokey Wilson love, who we'll mention in a minute. But I do think that this is a different offseason for Justin Herbert, not just in installing this offense, but it's the first time he didn't touch a football for like 2 or 3 months because of the torn labrum surgery and repairing that. Not that it was his throwing shoulder, but obviously it affects the way you throw. We saw it last year with all the batted balls and trying to kind of correct that issue. We saw, the increased height angle early on in training camp. So I do wonder if part of it is installing the new Kellen Moore offense and taking those deep shots, but also trying to get Herbert a little bit more reacclimated, a little bit more comfortable in terms of pushing the ball downfield. And obviously we saw that Herbert is, this is kind of a PFF debate that's going on right now. Like, is Herbert great for turnover-worthy plays, or is he a little bit too risk-averse, right, in the Joe Lombardi system? So I think that they want to get that kind of balance. Maybe Herbert will throw a couple more turnovers, but still be taking, some of those shots deep, which is ultimately kind of what they want for this offense to find that, Allen Mahomes type level of balance, right? So I definitely think that is, interesting about this offseason for Herbert and how he's going to look, because this is the first time he really came in kind of just simply, recovering as opposed to, training all the time. But obviously not a concern for him heading into year 4 now. One other thing.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I was going to say, even though it's Kellen Moore, I think we're forgetting about new quarterbacks coach too.
Doug Nussmeier.
So I feel like, while people are saying Kellen Moore, it's like, Nussmeier is going to be vital to making those changes too. So I think people are forgetting about him. So while the focus, yes, is on Kellen Moore's new offense, we're forgetting about the one who is also going to be important to Justin Herbert's development as well, and then fixing like that arm motion as well. And one of our contributors at Chargers Wire, Juliet, who couldn't be here, she wrote an article about that and just her observations from the changes with Justin Herbert's mechanics and then his throwing motion as well too. So we're seeing that early on, which is very promising. So, that's going to go a long way to eliminating those batted balls and like that. So.
Yeah, no, I think Doug Nussmeier is a good point. And Herbert, he was kind of getting asked about, hey, how's Kellen Moore's offense? And he actually did take the time to specifically, point out Doug Nussmeier and sort of what he's been doing with him this offseason. So I thought that was notable, right? Herbert hasn't necessarily been the guy to, go down the list and mention everybody. So the fact that, he kind of stuck out to him was worth mentioning. As we head into training camp, there's going to be players that we all fall in love with and then unfortunately get cut because that's the name of the business. Who are some of the guys that you think kind of stick out as could be training camp stars? I obviously mentioned Pokey Wilson, who, got some highlight and some love on the Chargers Twitter this week. But who are some guys that kind of stick out to you on this roster?
I think we saw some highlights early on of him. I think he had an interception in OTAs, and that's third-round pick Diontae Henley. I expect him to be a standout. You see the athleticism, you see the speed, you see just the chirpiness, just the energy that he plays with. I feel that he's going to make some noise early on. I expect him, he's already a fan favorite. We saw him after the draft with just how enthusiastic he was to be joining the team. He's a funny guy, just very outgoing. So if I were to pick one guy who I expect to, be solid, contribute in training camp, it would definitely be Diontae Henley.
Yeah, I think Deion for sure. And that's going to be just interesting to see how that all shakes out, right? Because obviously Kenneth Murray is currently positioned to be, Kendricks is positioned to be middle linebacker in terms of being the starter, in terms of being the green dot. But Kenneth Murray is kind of your linebacker too that's also going to be on the field. So, I'll be curious to see if kind of Deion, unlike the Chargers' other late day 2, early day 3 picks, kind of makes a more instant impact as Kenneth Murray. We know his status with the organization in terms of having his fifth year option declined, right? So if they do get that kind of performance out of Diontae Henley, that's kind of only a sky is the limit for this team if they finally do kind of fix the linebacker position, right? So I do think that would be interesting to see for sure.
What about you, Alex? Who are you excited to see, or who do you expect to make some noise?
I try to think of the guys. Yeah, I mentioned Pokey Wilson, but I'm trying to think of guys that just kind of have that exciting play style. I don't know if the Chargers really have that at running back this year. I know they have Tyler Hoosman, but I don't know if he's necessarily going to be making that kind of noise. But yeah, overall, getting to see all the rookies, and Staley even pointed out he was surprised with how kind of professional the rookies were in this period. It does feel like this is a more instant impact rookie class, right? As opposed to some of the other classes that the Chargers have had to this point. I'm really interested to see what Alohi Gilman kind of is at this point, because Derwin kind of shouted him out said that he has, full confidence in him as a player. So if he, as your second safety or as Derwin's running mate, effectively is able to make a big difference, then like that kind of like puts to bed a lot, not necessarily puts to bed, but probably like eliminates you from like the John Johnson stuff and all the stuff that we were hearing, necessarily in the spring about the Chargers wanting another safety. And if he takes another step this year, that's only another, feather in the cap of the secondary. So I'm kind of looking to see how he looks. I don't know how much he's going to play like in the preseason, maybe a little bit. Staley's always been very hesitant to like play starters in the preseason at all. But maybe we see him out there a little bit. But I'm just curious to see how it kind of looks because he was in the right position to make some plays last year and overall played well in place of Nasir Adderley. But I do think this is kind of like a prove it year, so to speak. I believe this is also, what year was he drafted? 2020?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2020. So this is his last year of his contract. So obviously contract year for him, which is going to be huge. But obviously, yeah, seeing Quentin Johnston and all the other rookies, that we want to see on this team and just seeing what this offense looks like in training camp. Because, the offense last year, training camp is not always like a representative picture, right? We thought we were going to get DeAndre Carter end rounds and like all this stuff, and we ended up getting it at the worst time. But it's not always necessarily a representative picture. So yeah, you are looking for more of those individual performances as opposed to something schematic.
Going with another safety, I'm excited to see AJ Finley. I liked him coming out of college. I thought he was going to be a guy that would get drafted, but he's just like JT Woods coming out. The ball skills are there. 8 interceptions at Ole Miss. Love the range, love the instincts, love the ball skills, but I actually thought he was solid as a run defender too, which I think is something that we're not talking about as much on the back end of the defense.
Right.
Yes, while Asante Samuel Jr. was stellar in coverage, he struggled as a run defender. And, I still cannot stand when analysts point to the Chargers' run defense issues being in the middle of the defensive line. It actually came on the perimeter, starting with the edges, and Joey Bosa went down too. But just the back end of the defense, we saw a lot of missed tackles. So that's something that I'm hoping the team is able to shore up, whether it's something that they work on or even, bringing in with some of these new guys and maybe even seeing like a UDFA like Cameron Brown out of Ohio State too, to see if he can actually make some noise and help out in that area too. But I'm really hoping that Asante can make some strides in that department. I'm actually writing an article of areas of improvement still for this. The run defense on the perimeter and then just an open space, that's still an issue. So, it's not the middle of the defensive line. That was not an issue. It came
right.
the edges.
Yeah, speaking of, I do think that with Austin Johnson kind of missing the time that he has so far, I didn't really participate in minicamp too much. He's kind of on the J.C. Jackson. I don't even think he was necessarily on the field. He was, still recovering from his knee injury that he had last year. So if he's kind of unable to start the season, my thought kind of turns to like somebody like Gerard Clark or somebody like that, or they're undrafted free agents, because there is probably another opportunity, even if it's maybe for 1 week or just to make the practice squad. Huge opportunity there, potentially with the defensive line a little bit still banged up from how last year ended. So, I think that'll be interesting to watch in training camp for sure. Any other kind of final thoughts here?
No, going to training camp, the preseason, it's going to be very exciting. Just, there's a lot of there's high expectations surrounding the Chargers every single year. It's been like that for previous seasons, but I'm pretty optimistic heading into the season. I feel like they did a good job with making changes to the coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball. This is a team that lacked depth. They addressed that in the draft. So, like, if one man goes down, I'm confident with the next man stepping in for whoever that may be. With the training staff changes, hopefully that will help with injuries and less of that occurring too. So I'm sure fans feel the same way, that there's just a lot of optimism surrounding this team. The AFC is stacked, but I feel like the Chargers can make some noise and get their first playoff win since 2018. So a lot of good things surrounding the team.
Yeah, I think it's weird because there is optimism within like the Chargers fan base, and like maybe not as aggressive as like in previous years. 27-0 is going to take a while to come back from, but it does feel like Chargers fans are more excited about training camp and all these things than certainly the national media is, because the Chargers were kind of the national media hype machine like last year. And it's kind of even gotten pointed out in press conferences, but they feel confident in their group, and in responses to those questions, Staley says that this is one of the deeper Chargers teams he's ever had, maybe the deepest. So yeah, excited to see definitely how training camp goes. I have to wait a month and a half for it, but it'll
I
be
will
here
add one more
before we know
thing,
it.
and I think that there are still certain holes and in specific
Mm-hmm.
that tight end position is definitely interesting to me. They're banking on Donald Parham to stay healthy because again, he might have been the best blocker in that position group. Honestly, I mean, we saw that in 2021, but unfortunately, the injuries that just kept him off the field last year. Trey McKitty, we know that they're hoping to get the inline blocking type of tight end from him, but he's just been underwhelming. Yes, I know that they're optimistic about Stone Smart, but they really lack a blocker in that department. So for them to not address it, it's very surprising. Again, they can make a move
Mm-hmm.
before training camp starts to get someone. And then I think with the safety and cornerback depth too, it's still a little slim because with J.C. Jackson's recovery, like you know, when are they expecting him to be back and then to actually be healthy? Like, is he going to be able to perform to that level that they're expecting when they initially signed him? Like, would hope that maybe they add another body, like with Jaw Taylor starting in the slot. Yes, he showed a lot of promise there, but is he ready to take on that role in the second season? And then with the safety group, Loie Gilman, they're very excited for him. JT Woods, it seems like he still has a lot to grow as a player. And then I get it with Raheem Lane too. Again, another player, UDFA, that they are excited about. But something about those position groups, I just feel like they could be shored up a little bit. I get it. John Johnson, a lot of us thought that he was going to be signed. That have been a splash signing. There's still time, but those are three position groups that I hope they can address. At least one or two of them, but we'll see. I
Yeah.
know they brought in they bring in Darius Shepard to
Yeah. Yeah.
compete with Darius Davis for the returning job, obviously. But I think it's those three position groups are something that I'm keeping my eye on between now and start of training camp to see if they address because there's still a lot of talent out there in the free agency market. So will the Chargers dip into that pool? I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I do think they probably make some kind of signing at some point. I look at tight end because, yeah, like the blocking component is like kind of not as present there right now. I think you're kind of banking on Donald Parham, like you said. Haven't seen it from Trey McKitty. And then, like, I would just be interested to see if they would want someone who's available. And there are some good blocking tight ends, like, available. Like, if they wanted, like,
I'm Jeff Swain.
yeah, Jeff Swain, even Kyle Rudolph, who's like still kind of lurking out there. Still a lot of quality like blocking talent. Not necessarily going to go get you 200, 300 yards or something, but still going to contribute to the offense in a big way. And I think about running back too, because when we talk about that, obviously Ekeler has been begging for more running back depth and for somebody to kind of step up to be that true complementary back to him. Joshua Kelly, I think, did a good job of it last year. Obviously, missed some time on the IR for about 4 weeks. So, kind of interested to see what he has. Isaiah Spiller, like, he's kind of the big wild card, right? Could have a breakout season. Does the coaching staff trust him, right? Like, that'll be, as one of the younger running backs in the league, I think a big question heading into this year. And then you look at what the Chargers did to shore up last year, right? They signed Sony Michel, kind of a failed experiment that didn't really work, or like, but they could still look for that running back guy in free agency. And obviously the guy that everyone will kind of point to is more so than a Dalvin Cook, like a Zeke Elliott. or something like that, if people want them to go in that direction. Still a lot of running back talent, I think, left on the market too. It'll be interesting to see how they shore up these positions, especially, you mentioned John Johnson, safety. Even though we keep mentioning it, maybe it just won't happen at this point. But it does feel like there is a relationship and a connection there, obviously, from the Rams days that can kind of be, brought in. Even if he's not going to be the green dot, they've given that role to Eric Kendricks to kind of be that safety 2, safety 3, depending on what they think about Alohi's development at this point. Yep.
A lot of compelling storylines heading into camp, but again, us at Chargers Wire feels good to say that. And obviously, the guilty as charged and Chargers Wire crossover. We're going to make sure to supply all of the content that you guys need. Really stepping outside the box. I'm excited. This is normally a dead period for most, but we're going to make sure to supply the content to get you geared up for training camp and just the upcoming season in general. So
yeah, I wrote a long piece about the kicker battle yesterday. I'm ready for this, baby. I'm ready for June. I'm ready for July, and take this on until July 28th or whenever training camp starts. So excited to do that over Chargers Wire. Thanks. Thanks, Gavino, for the opportunity. And as always, see you guys next time on Bolt Breakdowns, and bolt up.